that you speak
that.
to whatever you want. You want to speak to. I'm okay with. I'm okay to going down rabbit holes. That's the point of this. Is just to give you a platform to.
I'm really good at non sequitur anecdotes. So
nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Adds color.
Might be my forte, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and yeah, like I said, I won't stop you. I won't try to correct you. Like, no, we just keep talking. And then the only other thing really is that at the very end, when I say, oh, okay, hey, coach is great, appreciate it, blah 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 blah, and it's almost like we cut. Don't hang up because the software has to upload because it's recording on your side and it uploads to the cloud.
Okay. What do you want me to refer to you as, by the way?
Whatever you want. You can Paul. Yeah, you can.
Okay.
At this point, it doesn't matter. The whole SimpleCoach started out because there were some coaches that I just didn't want them to know who I was because of my son. Who was going through the recruiting process, and it turned out to he was one of those like COVID year recruiting class that turned out to be a nightmare, and I think the cat's probably out of the bag anyhow. So if you want to call me Paul, that's fine.
Okay. It flows a little better than SimpleCoach.
Yeah. At some point, it sort of stuck after the SimpleCoach. I didn't know what else to call myself, you know.
No,
so
it works. Yeah.
All right. So if you're good, we'll just. I usually pause and then I run into a spiel and.
Yeah, and then this thing is like, once you put it out there, do you edit it all, or you just like put it out there as is?
So when I say, "Hey, coach, thanks for joining," to the end when I say, "Hey, see you later."
Yeah.
Unless there's something where you're like, "Could you really?" remove that, I'll remove it, but usually that's it. Like I just post it all.
Okay.
Like I don't.
Cool. I was just checking.
So, the only other thing I do, just so you know, is I do these things called quick shots where I take just for content, right? Like I'll take if you say something interesting to me, which everyone always does. So anywhere between 3 and 5 little snippets of something that you say. So if I ask you. Something like I'm going to ask you about the Northern Athletic Collegiate Conference, right? Like, what's that about? So I'll take that answer and I cut it out, or I'll take it and then I'll post it like 3 months down the road as a separate video that's only like 3 minutes long.
Okay, cool.
So, okay, so you good?
I'm ready.
All right.
Do I look okay?
You look more than fine. I like the Pele. Is that a Pele lunchbox up there? I mean, you know what's funny? Boy, we're already gone. We might just leave it here and just keep rolling with it. So your videos. The videos you do on Instagram, wherever I've seen them.
Instagram or Twitter,
Instagram or Twitter, that I've watched. You were doing the highlights throughout the season, and then you're walking through Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm like, I bet you his office has so many cool little knickknacks. And so now I see the Pele lunchbox and a bobblehead up there, or one of the.
Well,
looks like
it's funny because if you. When I got in my office today, I turned my desk to face that because if you saw the way my desk usually faces, it'd be a blank wall.
Yeah.
I've been trying to put on it, and I'm like, I haven't done it, but this thing has all the stuff.
That's a lot more entertaining. That one's a lot more entertaining.
Yeah.
So, and I see Ali. Is that a book on Muhammad Ali?
Anyhow. Yeah. I got a bunch of sports books up there, and then actually, if you looked at, I tried to get pictures of. Every team I've ever coached.
Oh, nice.
It doesn't have to be every season, but like if I had U15 boys team and I coached them for 4 years, I had a picture of them at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And
very cool.
I mean, the big picture up there will play a role eventually in my story, but that's Jimmy Banks, who if you know his history, who was on the 1990 World Cup team. And so he was the first player from Wisconsin to play in the World Cup, and he was the head coach here at MSOE prior to myself. Yeah. And that's why I assisted, and he passed away of cancer on April 26, 2019.
Yeah.
So I had that photo of him framed.
Speaking of Wisconsin, do you have any connection to Jesse Marsh? Because he's a Wisconsin.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know Jesse well, but in 1994, I was playing on an adult amateur team because there really wasn't pro soccer then, and we were the team I was on, the Milwaukee Kickers. We were the final warm-up game for the Swiss national team before the World Cup. So their first game was against the United States.
In the Dome.
In the Dome.
I was there.
Yeah.
I was there
too, but now I was like way up. After playing against the team, I was like in the highest rank.
Yeah, they're like, hey, thanks for it. Get up there.
Yeah. So there was a gentleman from here named Jerry Ponick who was their liaison. And so he said, oh, here's a team that could play you. Like these guys from Wisconsin could play you, and they'll give you a game that will replicate the U.S. And Jesse Marsh was on that team. We did not replicate the U.S. We got killed. But Jesse Marsh looked like an actual player playing against the Swiss national team. And I always like to say that we're the unheralded heroes of the U.S.'s trip to the knockout round of the 94 World Cup. Because Switzerland was unprepared because they played the Milwaukee Kicker major team prior to the U.S.
awesome.
team.
That was well done. I thought you were going to say, because we just broke their ankles the whole time. That's all we had.
There might have been one player who got hurt, actually. But no, there's nothing nefarious happened. That's
I know Jesse from Princeton. I was a coach there, and actually, part-time, actually volunteer coach technically. I was there for the free gear, really. I had a regular job and I had a young family, and I kept telling Jim, look, every year I tell him the same thing. I was like, look, if you find somebody better, give you more time, all that stuff, I am more than gladly to submit my resignation and make way. And he finally he came to me and is like, Paul, I got somebody that I'd like to bring on, and I'm thinking as a volunteer, and I'm like, I was kind of like a little off. I'm well, who could be better than me? Whatever. I was really bravado then. He goes, Jesse Marsh. And he had just gotten let go or he just left Montreal or something like that. Right. I was like, okay, I'm done. It was great. I had a blast. Thanks for all the free gear.
Makes sense.
And so now I could say I let Jesse Marsh continue on his coaching career because I stepped away from Prince.
Jesse Marsh.
Yeah, paved the way. Yeah. There you go. All right. Coach, I'm just going to tell you, I might just use this front end piece because this has been fun, and I don't think we've said anything. Yeah. Hey, so let's just jump right into the part of this, I guess that we're here for, rather than these stories, which are just awesome. We'll talk a little bit about that too, because you have some, really interesting storytelling, because it's not reporting, right? It's storytelling. And I think your blog, we'll talk about that a little bit, but your blog, Ponderings from the Pitch, it's actually really good, really, really good stuff. So
thank you. That's nice. Yeah.
But let's just turn to the soccer part. You've been head coach for Milwaukee School of Engineering for 3 years. Did I get that? 4 years?
This is my fourth season.
Fourth season, that's it.
Yeah.
The whole COVID thing has me all messed up. So
it is weird.
You were 7 years before that. I think you were the assistant coach.
Give or take.
And then, give or take.
Yeah.
What's your experience, your soccer experience been like? And then ultimately, how did you end up in the position that you're in at MSOE right now?
How long do you want this story to be, Paul?
I have no, like I said, there are no rules. So you go.
The simple answer to how I ended up in MSOE is Jimmy Banks and I worked together in the 90s, in the mid 90s. I didn't know him well, but Jimmy, like when I was a kid, he was 4 years older than me, and so when I was a kid, he was like one of the guys that you wanted to go see play, right? Because he was Jimmy Banks, and he was like the guy who was the artist with the ball and everything, and you would like, if you got a chance to go see Jimmy Banks play, you were really excited. So in the 90s, like I think it was like 96, 97, we were both working at the Milwaukee Kickers Soccer Club, and we would have pickup games in the morning. And so like 7 in the morning, we'd play pickup games with all the soccer people in the office, and it was a lot of fun. We became friends. And then I was gone for a couple years at Purdue University. When I came back, I ran into Jimmy, and I moved into the same neighborhood where MSOE is. And I didn't start coaching with him at that point, but we would like work out together and play basketball. And then we ended up having a running soccer tennis match against 2 other coaches. And every Wednesday we'd play soccer tennis against them. And so we developed a friendship. I ended up coaching or at least one of his kids I coached on my team, and then another one of his kids played for the club I was coaching with. And so we were just friends. And then even though I think they officially now have me starting here in like 2012, but I think it was around 2008. Actually, like back in the background there's a picture of a team, and I put that up there only because I recognize that as 2 of the guys that were on the team the first practice I showed up for. So Jimmy would practice at 7 in the morning, and I would walk my wife to work, and where they practiced was right across the street from her work. And I'd walk over and say hi, and then he'd go, "Hey, go play." And so I'd jump on and play with the guys on the team, which I'm not sure. I mean, it doesn't matter anymore. Jimmy's, like I told you before, Jimmy's passed away in 2019, so no one's going to get him in trouble for a violation at this point. But I think I don't know if it was legal for me to play, but he said, "Come on and play," right? And so about 35 pounds ago, maybe, I jumped in and played with the guys. And then one day I said, well, their goalkeepers were just like throwing the ball back and forth for what seemed like an eternity, which might be one of my biggest pet peeves I carried over.
Pet peeves. Thank you. Thank you.
Just goalkeepers throwing the ball back and forth for.
Oh my God.
I was like, it's not the bullpen, man. So
no.
I said, do you want me to warm up your goalkeepers? And he said, sure. So I warmed up the goalkeepers, and then, I just kept coming back. He couldn't get rid of me.
Yeah.
And so
like, I can't kick this guy out now.
Yeah. I couldn't make games at that time because my main job was club soccer. Yeah. And so, but I kept showing up for practice because as a club soccer coach, I didn't have work at 7 a.m. And so it was, walk my wife to work, practice at MSOE, Jimmy and I get breakfast, and then maybe play a little soccer tennis ourselves. And, and so that's why I started at MSOE. It wasn't a career move. I was a club guy. That's what I did for a living. And but I liked hanging out with my friend. I liked the kids on the team. And then around 2012, I left my club job after 19 years of traveling to every exotic location in the United States. Like Rockford and Fort Wayne and
Rockford. Yeah, I say the same.
By the way, I love Rockford.
Fort Dix.
No offense to Rockford, because it's an hour and some minutes from Milwaukee. They got great fields, and the Matus brothers are there, and I love them to death. But I just said, I'm kind of tired of traveling and doing all this stuff, so I backed away from that world. And at that point, I started getting to the MSOE games, and then sadly, in late 2018, Jimmy was diagnosed with stomach cancer.
Oh my God.
That had traveled to, other organs. And April 26, 2019, Jimmy passed away. Yeah. And so,
what a shame.
In the worst set of circumstances, I got a really nice job. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the short version on how I ended up
Yeah.
at MSOE. How I got started in coaching. I'm 52, so that's a lot longer. Story of my travels to get here. But that's the more immediate
So
version.
can I ask you the I mean, so you really had no, I don't want to say this. It's not. I never say the right thing, so I apologize if I offend. But like, you had no real aspirations to be a head college coach, did you? Like, there are guys now that purposely come out, they find an assistant job, they jump around until they find a good spot, and then they make the leap. You had no aspirations for that?
No. I when I was younger, I wanted to be a college coach. So my first job was at Marion University. And I was a volunteer assistant with the UW Milwaukee women's soccer program.
Yeah.
And then I made the move to Purdue. So I was doing club soccer. I was like doing everything, Paul. I was like doing club soccer, high school soccer, college soccer, bartending, working at a factory, after school daycare. You had to make money, right? And there wasn't a lot of money to be made back in the early 90s in coaching and mid 90s. So I did all that. And then Sue Moynihan, who was the head coach at UW Milwaukee, became the assistant at Purdue University. And she was probably the reason I got the job at Purdue. And so at that point in my life, I thought, I'm doing college soccer. I'm going to pursue this. And then two things happened. One, really simple. Everybody gets this. It's kind of like, what is that movie? Good Will Hunting. My wife, my now wife, then girlfriend, was not going to travel with me she wasn't moving to West Lafayette, and she wasn't going to travel to every next job I took. Yeah. And so I was like, well, okay.
How dare her?
Yeah. Right? And so,
sorry.
I was doing these leave at, 4 o'clock on Friday, come back at 3 a.m. on Sunday morning, back to Purdue, and I kind of thought, well, I kind of like her. And then I was in Florida recruiting for Purdue, and my parents were on vacation there. And in between recruiting, I went to where they were on vacation, and we were playing cards, Sheep's Head for all the Wisconsinites out there. It's a very popular card game in Wisconsin. We were playing Sheep's Head. And my dad couldn't remember the rules. And I remember looking at my mom, and she just kind of gave me this look, yep, that's what's going on now. Yeah. And so, eventually he remembered the rules again. We played Sheep's Head, and I got in the car, and I started driving back. I don't know where I was going from, whatever part of Florida to another part of Florida. And I remember I pulled over, and not to be dramatic, but I remember I broke down crying, and I thought, well, I got to go home. How long am I going to be around my dad where he's going to know who I am? So my dad was in the beginning of Alzheimer's or dementia, and I kind of thought, that's it. And so I went back and went back to the old club I worked with, and from then on I was a club soccer coach, and college coaching was not, if you do club coaching long enough, you're not going to be a head college coach. It just doesn't. No. That's not the stepping stone.
Doesn't translate at that point.
No, and so it wasn't in the cards for me, and I didn't mind it. I liked club coaching. So I really was just helping Jimmy because it was fun. That was really it. There was he was 54 when he passed away, so I wasn't waiting, for him to retire or something. And he wasn't going anywhere. So that's how I ended up
all right, college. So I never divulged this on in the past year. I've never really spoken about it. So my respect for you was at a soccer level, right? And now my respect for you has sort of jumped to a whole new level. So I was living in Ohio and doing grad school. I mentioned before that I was an aspiring history professor. And I went home for Christmas, and similar situation where something was wrong, something was off. It was just my mom and my dad and my siblings were all married and had kids and stuff, and I was single, living large, and was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And same thing,
Your
driving
mom was?
back. No, my dad.
Your dad
my
was, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I made the decision driving back, like, well, I guess I have to go home. Like, what else do I do? Like, there's no way not to come. I can't.
Yeah.
So I quit everything, packed it all up, moved home, and took care of my dad for 4 years until we put him into a nursing home, which is, as an aside, and I'm sure you know how difficult that whole process with Alzheimer's.
Just a gas. Just a ton of fun.
I mean, my God, yeah.
By the way, to the audience, whoever watches us out there, we did not prepare this.
This is
we did not know
totally
each other's stories. Wow, that's
no.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm the same boat as you. Same, totally. My newfound respect for you, man. Totally. Now I'm getting all like.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Come up, we'll talk about something stupid now. Yeah. We can share a cry later.
Yeah. Let's do that off camera.
Yeah. How about the World Cup?
Yeah. So let me ask you. Let me get recombobulated.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, recombobulated. There is a story for you. Well, that's in that's not Milwaukee. That's in Minneapolis. The recombobulation area in that airport.
Oh, that's right. The recombobulation area. Yep.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's it. Anyhow, so hey, let me ask you something. I mean, because this is interesting. Like you've been at the club level for like you said, 19 years, a long time.
Yeah.
So you're frontline-ish, and especially at college now, whether you're doing the recruiting and all that stuff. I ask this because I'm, do you think from a player perspective, like, do you think players have gotten better in the years that you've been coaching, like from when you played to now, to the guys you coach now?
I think the median player has gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
I think from the time like I started playing soccer, that would be like, the 80s and early 70s to now. I don't think at least in Wisconsin, I don't think the best players are any better, but the average player is a lot better.
Is a lot better.
At least in Wisconsin, I think there was a cultural a cultural thing that happened where soccer got athletes and in a lot of cases was able to jump ahead of football, right? And we're in the state of Wisconsin, right? Jumping ahead of football
is crazy.
Yeah.
It's like,
because I'll tell you, my DVR is a bunch of soccer games and the Green Bay Packers. That's my DVR. Right? Well, and the Milwaukee Bucks. But the Milwaukee Bucks play 82 games. But the Packers, that's religion around here. So there was this period, I think, where because club football hadn't really developed in the same way, like you went to high school and if you were a good athlete, you wanted to play football, right? Well, this generation of kids in the 80s started playing soccer, and suddenly around here, a lot of the schools were like, oh my God, the football programs were like, we just lost the best athletes to soccer because they started playing the sport when they were 8 and 9 years old.
8, 9 years.
Yeah,
old.
so I think like there was this period in the 90s where there was just a bunch of really good players that came out of Wisconsin, but then the football movement was like, oh, you have soccer clubs? We're starting football clubs, right?
Yeah.
And then it's football, right? So the other two things that happened on a just notoriety basis was the Wisconsin Badgers got good at football, went to the Rose Bowl in I think 94 for the first time in forever, and they've been kind of good ever since. And then and then Reggie White and Brett Favre showed up for the Packers, and suddenly the Packers ended their reign of stinking, and so football became the big thing again. So that's a long drawn out answer, but I think there's so many good players now, but I don't think there's the same amount of great players as there was in previous years, at least around here, around Wisconsin.
That's an interesting point, right? Though, and I think that I'll say in New Jersey, it strikes me that is the case too, where the median player has gotten better, but you don't see that exponential growth at the top end, right? You don't see these kids going from really good ball players to great ball players. They're still really good ball players, but they haven't had that type of growth.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I think it's just that, like, eventually if you're going to be a pro, you're going to be great, right? You have to be a great athlete. Like, you just can't escape that. No, obviously, you have to be able to play soccer. But,
right.
You know, there's a reason Kylian Mbappe is great, right?
Great. Yeah. Oh, totally.
Right. There's also another level of athleticism where you're like, ooh, like, I didn't know somebody could do that. Fun. Right.
And then you watch the World Cup, and you're like, look, whatever team. It doesn't matter the team that's at the World Cup. Australia, right? Like these guys are at a different level than most players. Like just physically, athletically, they're just at a totally different level than.
Yeah. Well, and look at the U.S. team. The U.S. team is really fast and strong, and they're good, right? Yeah. Right. So, you know, when I say the level of player isn't good, like, look, our World Cup team is probably the best team we've had since, you know, arguably 2002. But that's a serious team. So I'm just if you're talking about like D3 soccer and recruiting right now and all that kind of stuff, the players that we're recruiting are way better than they were 10 years ago because there's so many more good players. Yeah. And then you add in the amount of foreign players now playing college soccer. Yeah. And so now for the American-based player, the kid that maybe one time was going D1 is now going D3.
Do you get foreign players to?
Not really. Everybody else does.
Well, it depends on the school, right? Because some schools, like I think St. Olaf is one, North Park is another. Like they have this. There's a pipeline that exists that goes beyond the sport, right? I'm not saying like soccer coaches specifically do this, but that there's some sort of academic pipeline to somewhere.
Yeah, there's different. You know, schools offer different kinds of money to international students based on the school, and then depending on the major, right? Some majors might be easier to bring kids from overseas, over here for. So I think that plays a part in it. We have an exchange program with a German school, and so, every couple of years we have, like our leading scorer this year was a German exchange student, but we get him for a year, right? He just comes for his senior year. But I don't really actively recruit foreign kids that much because it costs money. They don't get a cheaper deal here than the American kids. No. And so.
And then you want to make sure that you're finding the right players, right? So there's hey, I can recruit foreign players, but then you want to be selective, right? Because hate to say it, this is a surprise to many, but not all foreign players are good. Like it's.
Well, there's the part have you seen them play? Do you know them as a person? The big advantage the foreign guys usually have is, they're 20-year-old freshmen. Or 21-year-old freshmen. That's the biggest difference. I don't know if it's always the actual
that they're better.
But they're mature, right? And if they wanted to be a pro, their attitude about what soccer is different. If you wanted to be a pro and then said, no, I guess I'm going to go to the United States and play college soccer, and you're 20 or 21 compared to an 18-year-old kid from the United States, I just think your mentality is different. So. There certainly is advantages to foreign-based players, and if there wasn't, people wouldn't be doing it, right? But are they all better? No, I just think the maturity thing is probably the big.
Well, it's kind of like the latest thing, and I think it's just a temporary thing. Is this all the grad students that have the extra year of eligibility that play when they have the opportunity? And are they better? Maybe, but there's a difference between, like you said, a 21, 22, 23-year-old grad student than there is a 18-year-old, 17-year-old freshman.
Yeah.
Just a maturity difference.
Yeah, especially on the guy's
game.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah, because physically a freshman could be a pipsqueak. Right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
the 23-year-old, like the guy we had in our team this year is 24. And my wife came to saw the first game. She goes, "Wait, it looks like an adult." You know? Like he looks like a man. You know, the rest of your guys don't look like that.
No,
and I'm like, there is a difference. Yeah,
you'll take it. You know, like
hey,
rolls your way, right? Why not? So, hey, let's talk a little bit about your writing, because I think that was the most interesting thing. And I mentioned earlier about your blog, Ponderings from the Pitch. Like, where's this storytelling come from? Like, what got you into? Like I said, because if you, and like I mentioned, I'll put it down in the description. But to me, the cool thing about the ones that I read, that they're like little stories about that. Just so happens soccer is the theme, but they're stories about life and about individuals you've come across. Like, how did that all start?
I guess I'm Irish, you know, so have a penchant for storytelling, I guess. You know,
well, at least you're not singing it, right? Like you're not.
Yeah. Like most Irish Americans, you know, we just claim the Irish side more than the rest, right? But you know, I've always enjoyed writing, you know. So again, you said we can go down, you know, wormholes or whatever.
Go.
Yeah. So when I really thought I'd probably be an English professor, like you said, you were going to be a history professor. I thought maybe English professor, you know, or English teacher. My dad was a high school history teacher, and he loved coaching. You know, and so I was, but he knew nothing about soccer. I grew up on the sidelines of football, you know, when I was a kid. But at 5'7", 150 pounds, you know, football wasn't.
It ain't happening.
Wasn't. Yeah, 5'7" might be a stretch too. But so when I was in college, I was an English major, and I kind of thought that was the direction I was going. And my senior year after soccer had ended, I went to Drake University. A woman by the name of Ramona Barber, who, you know, is kind of like famous in Iowa for these tournaments she eventually ran. But she contacted my roommate and I and said, "Hey, do you want to coach a youth soccer team? You guys have just finished playing. Do you want to coach a youth soccer team here in Des Moines?" And we were like, "Sure." And so I found myself in class. As opposed to listening to professors, I was like writing up practice and drawing out the lineups. Like, okay, if we're losing, we got to play, you know, this kid. If we're winning, we got to play, you know, this kid. And it was a U13 team, and already I was obsessed. And so I remember.
I never did that.
right, exactly. Right? And so I remember my parents came for graduation, and I had gotten awards for poetry, believe it or not, all things. And they came and they said, "Hey, you know, what do you want to be?" And I go, "Well, I think I want to be a soccer coach." And they both had this look on their face like they just smelled puke, you know. Like 4 years of education and you want to be a soccer coach. Anyway, so I wanted to be a soccer coach, but like the idea of writing was always in my blood, right?
Yeah.
And when I quit doing the expansive, you know, travel across the country club soccer thing, I thought, you know, maybe I'll write a memoir, right? And so I started writing a soccer memoir. And I wrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it and had like 3 different people editing it. And they were all like very nice and very good. And one day I was talking to one of them, and the one who knew the least about soccer, and I said, "You know, this thing stinks." And she kind of started laughing, right? And she was like, "Well," and I go, "It would just be better if it was a bunch of different stories, wouldn't it?" And she goes, "Yeah, I think that would be a lot better." And so I scrapped the memoir and started turning all the stories in the memoir into their own story. And then COVID hit, and I had way more free time. And so I started a blog. That was really it. And I took all the stories from the memoir, and then in that time I added other ones. And during COVID, I was pumping out for a while, like 2 a week. And really what I was mostly doing was revising stuff I'd already written. And so I did that for just a long time. And the whole, you kind of hit it on the head that the idea of it isn't that it's about soccer, because soccer is what I do, right? That's been my profession and my livelihood, and and would have been my hobby if I had another profession. But I really didn't want it to be about soccer, if that makes sense. I want it to be about the things we deal with in life, and have soccer vehicle for telling stories. And so that's what was fun to me. Like when I look at like a lot of soccer things that you would read, it's always about like what formation did you use, and
it's the game.
And I just thought nobody needs to read another boring thing about why we should go back to the Dutch system, or why we have to high press, like I was like, all that's out there. I'm like, I just like telling stories better, and I thought it was more interesting, so.
Let me ask you something. Now this is rabbit hole-y, right? Like totally down rabbit hole. Do you know Peter Wilt?
Of course I know who Peter Wilt is. I met him for the first time the other day. He kind of knew me again from these weird walk and talk. Because Peter Wilt knows everybody, right?
He's the mayor. He's the mayor of the United States soccer community.
Yeah, and like
it's the only way I could describe it.
I'm sure this is the same way in New Jersey, but Wisconsin soccer community's not huge, right? Yeah. It's still small relative to other things, and I've been in it for my whole life. I was at Jimmy, who I mentioned before, Jimmy Banks, the high school that he went to, Custer High School, they just renamed the stadium Jimmy Banks Memorial Stadium.
Oh wow!
And so we had a photo op there and everything, and I met Peter Wilt there for the first time. After all these years, I was amazed that I hadn't met him, but And so I just met Peter Wilt for the first time.
So rabbit hole here. So long time ago, when I started this whole thing about soccer after my playing days, trying to find out what I was going to do. I was broken at that point. Like I wasn't going to play, and I wasn't sure about the coaching thing for a variety of reasons. I was dealing with my dad, and so I started to write. And I probably wrote for a good solid 2-3 years about MLS. Largely because I started doing MLS because nobody was there. Nobody was really writing about MLS. And so there was this website called Internet. So, I mean, it was like me, Grant Wall, the usual stuff. They continued. I mean, they're full-on professionals. I was a hack, like I was just churning out stuff. I didn't. So anyhow, so I wrote an article. This is bizarre, but I wrote an article. I actually sent an email. A guy in Chicago, editor, like a sports guy, wrote an article about how soccer was terrible and the standard trope, right, that you read about. And I emailed the guy. I was like, hey, look, man, not for nothing. You could have that opinion, that's fine. But at least let me take you to a game. Like, if you're going to have that opinion. But long end of it was that I'm in New Jersey. He's in Chicago. He says, sure, I'll go to a game. I email Peter Wilt. I'm like, hey, you don't know me, but I just wrote this article, and this guy who's pretty famous in Chicagoland said he would come to a Chicago game. So I'm going to fly there. Can you get me tickets to the game for me and his buddy? And sure enough, he does it, does an article. We meet, talk to... And so since then, I've had this conversation going with Peter. But
do I get to know who this guy is?
I'd have to look up his name.
Okay.
I forget his name. I will look at it when next time you're talking. I'll do.
Yep.
I'll take. I forget his name. He passed away of all things, cancer, I think.
Yeah.
So, long story of it that comes back to you about why I asked about Peter is because one of the things he got involved with, or I heard about that I wanted to get involved with, was somebody was going to do a soccer journal, like a journal of soccer, that wasn't about soccer. Because I had been saying for the longest time, my problem with soccer in the U.S. is that it's all game specific, right? Like you support MLS, it's because it's MLS. It's a soccer game. Or if you support, you love whatever, like the cultural, the parts that really make people hold on to a game have nothing to do with about the game. It's about, right, the game is what brought them there, but it's all about this other stuff. And so they were trying, I think, to capture that. And I was like, that to me is where the soccer future has to go. So your stories, I read those and I'm like, this is what I'm talking about when I say culturally we need to get to a place where we talk about the game in this fashion that has nothing to do with the game. It's about the personal experiences and interactions that you have with people. So anyhow, I just went on a
tangent. And by the way, with that, like, one of the interesting things about soccer in particular is because it's a world sport.
Mm-hmm.
If I look at my experiences, right, I was a little Irish Catholic kid who went to Catholic grade school and Catholic high school, right? Well, soccer was where I got diversity. Soccer is where I played with African American kids. Soccer is where I met Serbs. Soccer is where I met Croatians.
Oh yeah.
And so, this ethnic city that we live in here in Milwaukee, right? Like, I wouldn't have been as exposed to those cultures if it wasn't for soccer, right? I would have been, closed off. But I think so soccer, like, when you talk about what it does for people, this fact that it's a world sport is also, awesome.
Yeah.
It just opens you up to so many different people and different cultures and different backgrounds anyway, you got the point.
That is it. Like all of my soccer stories, people don't like. First of all, I'm like an ego guy, so I remember all my goals that I scored, or all the saves I made, all the big games, all that kind of stuff. I do, but the stuff that gives it all meaning to me, I scored a goal in an inconsequential final of what we called the Guatemalan League in Mercer County. And I don't think it was particularly pretty at the time, but in my head, it was the greatest goal. I got up over all these guys and headed the ball in. And there was, I'm not kidding you, there was probably a soccer field surrounded by about 5 deep of people of every different language and a foot off the line.
Yeah.
So that you couldn't, and that was the game. And we ended up winning it. And it was probably one of the coolest experiences I ever had. And then what did we have afterwards? Because I was playing for a Paraguayan team. The wives of players, and we had this big cookout afterwards, and guys from other teams would come in. That's the stuff. That to me is how do we capture that in the U.S. and not talk so much about the game, but that sort of essence, because that's what drives most people to these things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's beautiful, and I can tell you, like, one of the things that happened here, like, I have some kids that I grew pretty close to that I coached, and one of them, he came over during the war in Kosovo, right? Mm-hmm. So that we have a lot of Serbian refugees, right, who lived in Croatia, but were Serbs, and so they came here as war refugees. Right.
Yeah.
And they all go to the same church, St. Sava, over there on on the south side of Milwaukee. A lot of them lived at the same apartment complex. Yeah, and I coach these kids, and it's a whole different world, right?
Yeah.
So it's fantastic. And you get this different viewpoint. And that's the Milwaukee soccer history, right? Because we have like the Bavarian Soccer Club, the Croatian Soccer Club. Milwaukee Serbs, United Serbs, Polonia, There used to be the Hungarian Tigers Soccer Club, but then communism came in, and then suddenly no Hungarians were coming to Milwaukee anymore. So
what happened?
Yeah,
that's funny because here in Jersey, like there was never the clubs, right? The clubs were the ethnic family organizations. So I played for the Ukes, the Ukrainians of all teams, for 2 years, right? And we would play against, Serbs. The Germans had their own thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how, right? Like, and some of the iconic places that, everyone plays on turf now.
Yeah.
I could say that I was one of those guys who played at Farcher's Grove in Union, New Jersey. That was literally dirt and rock.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you played on. That was the field. And that was, if you were anybody in soccer, that's where you, like, that was sort of like the aspiration. Like, man, I played at Farcher's Grove. I must be somebody, right? I must be a player of certain note. Because you didn't play there if you couldn't hang, So, man, all right, let me pull us back. I said I would never pull us back, but I wanted to pull us back because this is seriously, this is the thing that gets my gander up is it's, soccer to me is not, soccer to me is not plastic. It is not about the nice jerseys. It's not about, like you said, the going back to the Dutch system. It's a lot about that in the nitty gritty, and I do enjoy that. But what makes the soccer to me is all of the stuff around it that I find such joy from. That's doing this, having conversations with you and other coaches, where soccer is why we got together, but I learned so much more about everything else that revolves around the game than if I would if I just watched you guys play.
Right.
So. All right, I got to ask you, can you, because I may have mentioned this before. You guys were on a killer run this season, and that's how I got noticed. Actually, my sidekick, Paul Newman, one of the shows used to say, look at Milwaukee School of Engineering, and that's how I sort of got honed in on you. You were undefeated at the time. But could you give us a rundown of the Northern Athletic Collegiate Conference that you play in, for those folks who don't know much about it?
It's a 13-team conference, so it's big. I think we're one of the biggest in the country. It's basically southern Wisconsin with a couple teams from the north, and so I think there's 7 Wisconsin teams and 6 Illinois teams, or the other way around. I mean, there's a couple great things about the conference. One, the furthest road trip we have is 2 hours for a game, at least for Milwaukee, right? Because we're kind of in the middle. And the second thing is the teams are good. We're kind of like right on the edge of competing with all the top teams. So I'd say, the top 5 or 6 teams in our conference can compete with anybody. So it's a good conference. I like it. What more is there anything else you want?
No, that's good. That's more than fine. I just, we don't, again, part of this is East Coast and how heavy we are on the sort of the East Coast conferences, right? And I frequent the boards, the D3 soccer boards and whatnot, and the folks that I talk to, there's not much visibility that we get from the further out west you go, and that's just, I think, proximity. Like, I think the one conference that has everybody, I don't know, that pay attention to is like the OAC, right? Ohio Athletic Conference, because it's got some teams and it's competitive, and you're starting to see teams come back east here, and so I think that gets, but like the NACC and then a bunch of other conferences, it's a little harder, I think, to follow.
I think that the big thing with D3 soccer is nobody's traveling as much, right?
Yeah.
The budgets aren't the same, so it's not like being in the Big East, right?
No.
Right.
You're not flying from Milwaukee, to LA for a game or whatever.
Right.
To play
when we do that, it's a bunch of fundraising, right? And it's like
it's work.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah, so it is really different in that way. Like, I've only been heavily involved in Like when I helped Jimmy all those years, I didn't know anything about it. I showed up for games.
Yeah.
Like, and he'd go,
Yeah.
"Oh, we're playing so and so, and they're really good," and I'd be like, "Okay, I don't know. Like, what do I care? I'm just helping coach this team." So I can even tell you, like, I don't think until this year, I really paid attention to the rest of the country, because I started going, well, maybe we could get an at-large bid if we don't win the conference tournament. And that was the first time I ever thought about that. And then I started going, well, okay, how do we get the at-large berth? What's the...
Then you start doing math, as I always say.
Yeah,
right? Like
and I had never thought about that before. And so now it's prominent in my mind because we didn't get an at-large berth, and I'm like, oh, we probably needed to play a couple, tougher opponents, non-conference. Because I'll tell you, like, when you ask about the NACC, our conference, the hardest part is, I think a lot of conferences are like this. We beat each other up. So 3 teams tied for first this year. We were one of them.
Yeah.
Right? Then we had 3 teams tied for second. Yeah. At 24 and 23 points. Right? And then there was a team at 22 and a team at 21. So we had, in a 13-team conference, we had 8 teams within 2 points of each, or 4 points of each other, right? Yeah. And so we got this tough conference where I think all conferences are like this. Even the teams below that, you're like, oh, this is like we got to go play them, and we're supposed to beat them, but we got to bring our brass knuckles because they are not going to lay over for us. Yeah. So the toughest part
Tuesday night in Stoke, right? That's what you're dealing with in those games,
right? And you're going, boy, this game, like when you talk about all the SOS stuff and everything, strength of schedule. I'm sure the people who watch this, but like you're like, well, this game only hurts us, but we can lose. Winning this game doesn't help us. It's not going to help our ranking or anything. But man, we could lose this game, and so it's this war. Right, and I think we're really close as like the CCIW here and the MIAC in Minnesota, and obviously whatever conference University of Chicago's in, that's a little bigger conference.
The UAA.
We're right there. Our top teams can compete with them. We just haven't topped them yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
this is where I get in trouble. My thing though is that there's got to be a way to recognize your success. And I get these limited numbers, and I understand all that. But you had a really successful season, as far as I understand it, your conference and whatever. And then again, I look at somebody like Western Connecticut, who went 20-3, right?
And they didn't make the tournament, right?
And didn't make the tournament.
Somebody sent me that to make me feel better.
And I'm just kind of like, I understand, don't get me wrong, but you have to reward teams who do something that is still difficult day in and day out. It's not like you're picking daisies when you play, right? Like you're getting results, and that to me there needs to be a way in which the selection process recognizes teams that do that. And
I would say the answer. It's hard.
Yeah, no, I get that, and that's why I hit the easy button, right? Like, it's easy for me to say that. It's harder for you or for that committee to actually come up with a system that does that.
Our women's program, not this past season, but the season before, made it to the NCAA tournament for the first time in the history of our school with an at-large berth. And our coach there, he does a great job, but it's like no one knows about MSOE, And then he went and played a really difficult non-conference schedule and got some big wins, and then I think lost in the finals of the conference that year and got an at-large berth, and it was like, hopefully that starts to get us noticed, But it's just, I think it's hard. Like, I read about the Western Connecticut. I didn't read about them, but I saw that. I'm like, well, how do you not lose a game?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
And then as a coach, you're beating yourself up. You're thinking about if we hadn't tied this one, if we didn't, then you go down to the most minute detail if you care and you think, this guy steps up here and this guy drops and this guy can see the man in the ball and then we don't give up a goal and we win this game and then we got an at-large berth and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But like I said, to me, he did the hardest thing you could under any circumstance. It is very difficult to go undefeated in a season. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
right under any circumstance.
Yeah.
I don't care what your strength of schedule is. It's really hard to do, and like I said, because everyone has those Tuesday nights in Stoke, it's just really hard. Games are really hard because you got to travel on a Wednesday or a Tuesday, and you gotta go 3 hours away, and they don't play the prettiest of soccer, and you manage a way to win, and you do that. You should be recognized.
Well, and by the way, when it's in conference too,
yeah,
the fear goes away.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
in non-conference, you might go play somebody they don't know, like they've heard of you or they know you.
Yeah,
but in conference, they don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Right. They're ready to kick you just like they kick anybody else in practice, right?
Yeah.
And they've watched your games, they know your videos, they know your players, they know your team's tendencies, and so they come out for that, and it's different in conference, you know.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you, just because you are a School of Engineering, and I'm assuming I think we spoke and you mentioned like you're one of the few types of schools like you exist in your area, in your region.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of players? I mean, does it limit your pool? Does it to get players in that would be interested in MSOE, or is it?
I think, to be honest, for the most part, it's been a benefit. You know, we have a variety of most engineering degrees. We have business. We have nursing. Those are the three schools, and then we have actuarial science, user experience, construction management, anything that's kind of STEM related, or anything that kind of offshoots from technology degrees, if that makes sense, and nursing, right?
Yeah.
I think it makes it easier. At least I like it because when I go to the field, I know that I don't have to watch every kid. Like when I was at Purdue recruiting, you go to the field and you're like, well, every kid could come to Purdue because we have every major imaginable. Right? When you're at MSOE, you go to the field and you try to figure out, like, talk to the club coaches and stuff and say which kids are STEM kids, because I know that if they're a serious STEM kid, that they'll look at our university. Like, they can't not look at our university. They might look at other ones too, but you can't not look at MSOE if you're a STEM kid, because we're just really good at what we do. So,
right.
In that respect, it kind of makes it easier.
Yeah.
And it's just a desired major right now. And I say this, by the way, as we've been on this podcast, I'm a English major, right? I could never help these kids with one iota of their homework. You have a paper, I can help you write. They just look at me like I'm Actually, one kid came in my office and he was talking about, obviously they have to take some writing classes here.
Yeah.
Business and technical writing, that kind of stuff. And the kid goes, he's a freshman. He goes, this English class is just killing me. It's just killing me, coach. And I go, yeah. And I go, well, do you need help with it? And he goes, well, I think I'm getting a tutor. It's like not that bad. I just can't stand it. I can't stand English class. And I go, well, I was an English major. And he paused, and he was looking at me, and I thought, this freshman, I just scared the daylights out of him, right? Like, he's like, well, now coach hates me or something. And he's just staring at me with a blank face, like this. And then he goes, and then he finally goes, why? I was like, I burst out laughing. I thought it was the funniest thing ever. I thought I'd scared him, and then he just looked at me like, why? Why would you ever major in that?
Why would you ever want to do something like that?
Yeah. So I could come here
That's awesome.
and coach you guys, and then you could all leave and make way more money than me the day you walk out the door. That's why. So to answer the question about the major, like, I don't find it difficult. It can be constraining. Some people might find it constraining. It makes it easier for me to actually pay attention
to the right kids.
Yeah, and then I feel like I get to know them better, right? Because I can focus in on them instead of because sometimes recruiting is you go to the field and you mark down this kid, and then that half is over and you go to another game and you mark down this kid, this kid, and then you contact them and you get this big pool and then you narrow it down. My pool starts smaller, but I get to like really pay attention to the kid and get to know the nuances of their game. It's still a lot of work. I'm not who we kidding. You still gotta put the time in because a lot of kids are gonna say no, right?
Sure.
Before you get the yeses, but yeah.
Very good. Well, I spoke to, I think it was Coach Adam Clinton at RPI, who said the same thing. He goes, "You'd be surprised how much focus it puts in on your recruiting pool, just because you immediately eliminate kids who just aren't STEM kids, right? Like, you don't have an inclination for it, and there's a certain." That's actually a good thing, right? Because you could lose yourself in a recruiting class that you're trying to find guys out of, that if you have hundreds of kids, right? Whereas if you narrowed it down, I only know these 50 kids are going to be remotely interested in coming to my school. I don't know if those numbers are right, but it just sort of like, okay, so I can focus my time on those 50 rather than on the other 150.
Well, a lot of times when kids email me, and if the email is kind of vague, where I'm like, okay, they kind of looked up MSOE, but I'm not sure.
Kind of didn't.
Yeah, and I just have a 1-sentence response. What do you want to study? Rob H.
Yeah.
And if they come back with something that makes sense, and I start to talk, and if they never respond, I'm like, okay, they're not.
Like I told you after we talked, I told Simple Player number 2 about you guys. I'm like, they're engineering. I was like, you might want to reach out. And he's like, I'm not going to Milwaukee. Sorry. I tried to recruit for you.
Has he not seen my walk and talks? Does he not know how great Milwaukee is?
I mean, like I said, I'm like, watch those, and they're like a siren song. Like, you're going to love Milwaukee.
My wife just showed me something last night that we have the per capita most amount of, like, entertainment seats in the entire United States. So like theater, music venues, and everything. So per capita, Milwaukee has the most amount of seats for for going to concerts, plays, musicals, all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't have known that. That was like kind of cool.
You live it. That's why you don't know it. You live it.
But it actually is true, because we have music. We have Broadway Across America tickets, play tickets, Bucks tickets. Like we do all of it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk a little bit about soccer. What's your overall assessment of the season? Just off the top of your head, if somebody asks you, hey, how'd you guys do?
Well, I'll be okay. I'm nothing but honest. That's kind of my nature. I don't do well with anything else. I think anybody in coaching gets this. We finished 13-3-4. We only lost to 2 teams. I was heartbroken over losing in the semifinals of our conference tournament. I tell people, like, all those years of club soccer, when you lose a club soccer game and it's like that soul-sucking loss, right?
Yeah.
You lose the game and you're like, and then you stand up and you put your backpack on and you walk 100 yards down and you coach another game. When you lose the game in college, like that final game of the season, like that's it. You got to wait 9 months. So I think, man, we had a really good year and a lot of really cool moments during the season. And I think, that was November, now we're in December, so it's about a month gone. I think I've gained perspective, and I go, yeah, that was a pretty damn good year. But I don't know. I'm like, you don't get into coaching if you're not,
ambitious.
Yeah, and crazy competitive. Like, it's just who you are, right? So, you've heard about, like, the guy who came home to be with his dad and the guy who likes to write, and all this kind of stuff. And, I read books and go to musicals and plays. And then besides that, I'm a loon who can't handle losing. Right? So I think objectively a really good season, but like I actually told my wife, I go, I'm not going to do this. I go, but I think I need therapy. I think I honestly need therapy. I'm like, I'm so bothered, you know? And I go, but I'm not going to go get a
How do you
therapist.
think I feel?
Yeah. And I go, what do you think I need to do? And she goes, you need to go coach. Like, you just need to go coach. And I go, well, that's the problem with D3 soccer. I can't go coach right now. I'm not allowed to coach. And then she goes, well, have you thought about taking a club team? And I go, no, I'm not. I'm not doing it. Even though, like, I do miss that world. Like, I'm just not going to add that to my plate. Like, like I just told you, we have this nice life now. And if you're doing club soccer, it's 24/7 all year.
No, you're
everything.
done. Your nice life goes out the window.
So you talked about the rabbit hole. I just turned it. Was it a good season? Yeah, it was a good season. It was a good season. It was tough losing when we lost after doing so well, and then losing in the last 3 minutes on a corner kick was rough.
Is that what it was?
Yeah,
it was 1-1.
It was 1-1. We lost 2-1 on a corner. Yeah. And last year we lost in the 87th minute in the semifinals on a corner kick.
Oh my gosh.
So
I think the game's trying to tell you something, Coach.
Yeah.
I think that might be something you need to work on.
Yeah, it's not a mystery. Yeah. I think we gave up, I think it was like 19 goals this season, and 14 of them were set plays.
Yeah.
No,
okay, so
there's a trend there.
There's a trend. Identifiable trend based on data, right?
Unfortunately, they weren't all the same set play, so it was like,
Yeah.
Some penalty kicks and some free kicks, and some wide free kicks, and a couple of corner kicks, and a throw in or two, and enough to make me not sleep at night. So yeah,
that's I get that.
Yeah.
Hey, what surprised you about this about your team this year?
I think it was the I mean, I can't come up with the best word for it, but like grit, like when we started out the season and we're just kicking butt, right? And we're beating everybody.
Yeah.
And some of the teams we probably just should have beat, like we were just flat out better than them. And then we played Elmhurst, who's a decent team, but it was on a Monday. It was a weird day for a game. So actually, we weren't supposed to play them. We were supposed to play somebody else, and there was a coaching change, and they didn't realize we were on the schedule, that kind of stuff. So I had to go find a game. So I got Elmhurst, and we go down to Elmhurst, and we're playing on a Monday afternoon, and then the kids actually had to get out of class, which doesn't happen much for us.
Yeah.
We go down there, and we're playing fine, and we're out playing them, and we hit the post a few times and all this, and right at the end of half, we give up a goal that if you're Elmhurst and you watch the goal, you would be like, what? Like a tough, hard-nosed, like gritty goal they scored, right?
Yeah.
And if you're MSOE, you're going, my God, are we a bunch of wimps? Can somebody not tackle? Like, what the hell are we doing, right? So it's 1-0 at half, and we get a couple chances right at the start of half, and then we give up 2 more goals on wide free kicks, right? And we're down 3-0. And so that was like 25 minutes left. We're down 3-0. And we came back and tied it 3-3, scoring the last goal in the last 40 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there was a like just a really calm, like you would get this, but like you have engineering kids, right? These are not kids who yell and scream and are a bunch of extroverts.
They're not emotional.
Right.
They don't know emotion.
Right. And so we have this comeback, and it's like, they're human beings, so robots, but like they're yelling and screaming on the sideline, but it's not, that crazy kind that some people have, and I don't have a problem with that. Like, everybody's got their own culture, but just their ability to go, we got some work to do, and do it. Like, they were just great at it. Even when we, like, if I would watch a game and I thought we played bad, when I rewatched the game, I thought, we never didn't work hard. Like, it was never a hard work thing. There were things that didn't happen. Maybe we didn't combine well enough. Maybe, a player maybe tried to do something too special on their own instead of, playing with others better. But there was always this attitude that we're in the game, that we can come back. And so, that game was especially special because we scored in the last 30 seconds. It felt like a win, right? But we were down 2-0 in a conference game, came back and tied it 2-2. We tied a game in the 87th minute to make it 1-1, So we just weren't out of games. And even our losses, if you watch the end of the game, it's us knocking on the door, right? We only had 3 losses, but it's like, it's the ball just going by.
You were right there.
Yeah.
I think the only one was that first Aurora defeat, right? It was 2-0.
Yeah.
That seemed to be the biggest one, like the.
Well, it was the only game we didn't score in, and it was the only game. Well, we only lost 3 games, but we lost by 2 goals, and it was a late. Their second one was a late goal.
Late, because you're pushed up trying to get the equalizer. I figured.
Yeah, and you don't want me to go through all the details of that.
No. Okay. You can.
About 3 guys around the ball not tackling, and then
Oh, that now I could see you're getting all in a gander now. You're starting to twitch. Like, how did they not tackle? Right.
Right. And that's what I say. Like, I went back and watched that game, and for all the coaches, like, I don't have this huge assistant coaching staff, and I don't have like the ability to do all the analytics. But actually, after that game, I watched the game 3 times and did analytics, right? And I wrote down took statistics on everything, and so I could show the guys on the team like, hey, I've been telling you we need to do this better. Well, now here's the evidence, right? It's here, we lost this many second balls in the game, and we didn't combine well. Well, hey, in that game, it was like, without me going into the full detail, like, we have a team that keeps the ball pretty well and tries things. In that game, I think we attempted 3 wall passes and completed 1. And I'm like, how do you play an entire soccer game and only attempt 3 wall passes? Unless you're just counterattacking, which is cool. I'm not against what teams do. You will watch us in 2019, you would have seen us counterattack like crazy, and we were pretty good at it. But not to the way we play. I'm like, so the kids didn't not try hard, but there's just things they didn't do. So you go back to details like that, and that was the only time I did that all year because, like I said, I had to watch the game 3 times to write down all this stuff. It took a little bit.
I know how tracking stats is not easy to do in the D3 world because of the having to watch video. This whole channel started with me counting passes across like 150 games and like trying to make some semblance of does passing matter and a bunch of different stuff. And that started my first video. And I realized anytime I think about different stats that I would like to do, how onerous that can be. And you're just doing, even just sort of looking at a team and trying to do like an evaluation of a team, it takes time. Like, it's not something that you could do in 30 minutes and come up with some crafty stats that say, oh, we got to do this, we got to do it. Like, if you want to do it right, you got to watch, rewatch. Did I capture it right? Is this right? Is that?
Well, and the other thing is with stats and analytics and stuff, it's real, and it's healthy, but we shouldn't. I'm sure you know who Bob Gansler is, right?
Yeah.
So,
famous.
And he's a Milwaukee guy, right? So I grew up playing with his
legend.
Yeah, and so, I'm lucky enough to know him pretty well, and I'll go to breakfast with him every once in a while, right? And I was asking him about analytics, and he's great too because he's like, right, no nonsense, just goes. And he's like, it's all good, but if you can't see it, you can't coach.
Yeah.
And so I think. When, what all the numbers and the analytics does for us is it either takes what we've already seen and it reconfirms it, or in cases, it's going to give you a little info that you hadn't thought of before. And so I think it's important, like that we use it, but it's also, you can't get away from like the fact that, hey, when you're doing an overlap, right? Is like, are you just doing an overlap, or is there a little bit of like the defender doesn't know where the ball's going, right? Are you coaching that part, right? And what's the timing of it, right? And all that kind of stuff. So
I would say purpose timing runs.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
are you doing it with a purpose? Is your timing right? And are you actually making the run? Which is what I noticed. That's my big stat lately, is what I look at is runs. Are guys actually making runs? And I don't think that's the case. I think that's where most teams fall down. But.
Right. And you, by the way, you watch it and you think that, and then you go back and go, well, okay, let me get the stats on it and see if it's really true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think
the
danger is if you fall down this, rabbit hole, if you will, of just looking at stats, you can overwhelm yourself with these numbers, right?
Yeah.
And if you never use them, you're just not using a tool that would be helpful for you.
Yeah.
But I go back to what Coach Gansler said, which is like, you still have to be able to see it. You have to be able to watch it and see it and make observations because, like, that's your skill. That's big skill as a coach is to be able to see what's actually happening. And if you get caught up waiting for the statistics, you're gonna lose, your talent essentially.
That's a good point, because statistics can blind you to the real problem or to the real issue, right? Like it can turn you away from what you're trying to really solve for and point you and misdirect you if you're not careful with them, right? And if you're not using them in the right way.
Yeah.
To me, it just ends up being color. Statistics for me is color. Like, hey, I know the passing one was pretty easy, right? Because it's like every coach I talk to, every single one, always says, well, we want to possess the ball. Well, how do you possess the ball? Well, you possess the ball by passing the ball. Okay, so if you're a possession-based team, you have to be able to pass well. And then if you do the analytics, you're like, you're really not a passing team. So how's your possession work out there, right? Like, and you see the teams better up the scale. Anyhow, another one where I just sort of go off and like.
Well, and look, like with the every kid will ask you when they're recruiting, like, what's your style of play?
Yeah.
And, my response is always the same, is like, well, who's on my team?
Yeah.
So, like, I pointed out in 2019 we were really good at counterattacking, right? Well, we had a center forward or attacking mid, depending on, like, he usually started attacking mid, but he was a beast at counterattacking, right? And scored goals like crazy. But he was not a guy that was combining and all that kind of stuff. And then the guy that played kind of in tandem with him was a converted center back who was super talented and kind of didn't know it. But he was great in the counter, right? He was great at, like, threading a through ball and doing all this stuff. And then our other players, like our wide players, were guys who worked hard. They weren't 1v1 guys. They weren't super possession guys. They were good defensively. I'm like, well, what are we going to do? Play possession soccer with kids who aren't good at it? Like, we're just going to get destroyed. And so we countered, and we were great at it, Well, now we can play.
Now you play more.
Yeah. Well, but we got guys who can do it,
Good. Yeah.
We got outside backs who can play. We got, in every position on the field, really, we're pretty good at passing. And in some places we're really good. And we got some depth. So, do we play that way now? Yeah. Because we can.
Yeah.
It's not.
Because you can. Yeah. No, that's very true. It is again, sort of how it started was that, like, no one ever tells me I'd love to be possession based, but we're basically route oneing it all the time because that's all I have the capability to do. Every coach to tee, possession based, almost like throwaway lines. But
no, I never say that. I always say who's on our team.
Yeah,
like if we can do it, and then
it's true.
The opponent matters too. Like, I don't know, we can play the University of Chicago. Maybe if we played, who just won the national team. Maybe if we played the University of Chicago. I don't know. Maybe
you might be route one, and possession might not be your top priority.
Yeah, I'm like,
look at Stevens, right? Stevens, a really, really good team in possession, really knows with a purpose. And that second half against Chicago, they were defending 11 deep. They were defending deep, and because that's all they could do. Because look who you're playing. Chicago just sort of started to own it.
Yeah.
So. Hey, so two things. and Coach Clinton at RPI said this, which is why it came up.
RPI is what, by the way?
Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in New York. Similar school to you.
Yeah.
Which is why, right, Simple Player number 2.
I figured that. I just wasn't sure what that.
He mentioned, he said, look, I coach a bunch of engineers, and to them, the only way to really coach them is if you present things to them as problems to solve. And I thought, that's a really interesting way to put it, because that's very true. Again, for me, when I was a player, you wanted me to play really well, and you wanted really me to get me riled up. Like, that's all it took. Like, I was just a purely emotional blue collar. Just fire me up and let me go. My son, Simple Player number 2, even as a goalkeeper, to him, it's all analysis. Why did I let that goal in? And he wants to understand. And then you see him making these adjustments, and I see it all the time with him, making adjustments to his game as to, how to fix that again, and how to solve for that again. And it's like, and I always remember that from Coach Clinton.
You'll love this.
Engineers
when I started coaching, my assistant coaches who were former students here, right? Mm-hmm. They had a bet going on how many times I would say we're a team of problem solvers.
I love that. It's true, though. Yeah. It's like personality matters, right? Yeah. Personnel and personality matters, because otherwise... Yeah. That's why I think coaches are really good. Some coaches are really good, some aren't. Right? Why? Because they know how to manage the personality, right? If you had a bunch of artists, if you had a bunch of English majors, would you be telling them to solve problems? No. That wouldn't quite work that way.
Enjoy the beauty of the moment. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
As you step onto the lovely grass field.
Yeah.
Second thing, and I'll put the link down there because I literally found it. The Chicago Tribune guy, it's a guy by the name of Rick Morrissey. No. Yeah, that was the guy that I emailed to, and he became
okay.
Yeah.
Full circle there. Yep.
Sorry. Again, when it go down rabbit holes, sometimes you sort of cross back into the different path. So Rick Morrissey was the sports writer.
He just said he didn't like soccer, though, right?
He wrote a column where he said soccer was terrible or some sort, and then I invited him, and his follow-up column actually mentions me, like, and where are you from? New Jersey. And he's like, are you kidding me? You came from New Jersey? Like, I'll send it to you, but I'll also post it down
There was one of the stories I wrote, like a couple of them were more like essays, and one of them was about... I can't remember the exact story, but it was about like people who dislike soccer, right? Mm-hmm. And finding that like people were calling it un-American, and stuff like this, and communist. Yeah, and I was really like entertained by it. Actually, I was like, well, that's insane, because the one thing that like. So you get people who are upset, like the national team's not better, or they don't think, think soccer's popular enough. Like, when will soccer get popular? And I'm like, God, when I was growing up, we were watching Soccer Made in Germany.
Soccer Made in Germany.
Yep. And it was a 1-hour show, and frankly, I played soccer and I loved it. I could have cared less. Like, I had no, like, Soccer Made in Germany was on, and our coach would be like, oh, did you watch it? And I'm like, well, because I'm like, I couldn't identify with it, right? There was nothing to identify with. I was like, no, I watched the Packer game, and, I still go to sleep to the Bucks, and like, I'm an American who plays soccer.
Yeah.
And that was the 80s and everything. And then where we are now with, like, multiple professional leagues, and everywhere people are wearing jerseys, the fact that I can walk down the street I live in, and I could go to the bar at 7 a.m. and it's open to watch soccer games on Saturday.
Soccer games? Yeah.
I'm like, we've come so far as a country in this sport.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, and for people to be upset that we're not further along is insane to me. And by the way, it's not our national sport. Like, it's not. So it doesn't need to be like more popular than football or baseball or basketball. Like, I don't know. I'm on my soapbox now, but I don't really care. Like, it's come so far. It's awesome. Kids play it. They like it. People who never played soccer go to games, can tell me who plays for Man City.
Yeah,
That never would have happened. And so
I could spend a weekend. Anyone can. I could spend a weekend watching soccer all weekend long. Well, growing up, there could be months where I never got to watch a game just because it wasn't on. Like, there was nothing on.
The first, you might be able to appreciate this. The first full game I watched in my life on TV, and it was by chance, was France versus Germany in the semifinals of the 1982 World Cup. Do you know the game?
I was there at that time.
What?
In Spain. I was in Spain. I lived in Spain at that time. Yeah.
In 82 you lived in Spain?
In 82 I lived in Spain, yeah. Up until 84.
Yeah, so you were probably but that was the first game I watched, and if you remember it was like 1-1 at the end of regulation.
Yep.
And then went to 3-1 France, 3-3 Germany,
and then just
Schumacher, body stone, like knocked him out cold. And from then on, I hated the Germans.
Nearly killed the guy, right? Like, that was the play. Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, and it made me hate the Germans.
Hate the Germans.
I was like, well, they're evil. The Germans are evil, right? And I've lived in
that was definitely a crazy. Yeah.
In the United States, Milwaukee is the most German place ever, right? Us in St. Louis, you can't get more German than Milwaukee and St. Louis, right?
No.
And but I hated the Germans, but that was, I would think I was in 7th grade, right? And that was the first full game I watched, and I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. Now, of course, I saw I didn't just see a soccer game, I saw an epic game with heroes and villains and and had everything and kind of it was 82, France versus Germany. You still got a war thing going on there, kind of, and so it was everything all embroiled into one, and that sparked my love of watching it, and then I had to wait 4 years. Then I had to wait 4 years to watch another game, really.
So I moved to Spain in 1978. And basically, they didn't have baseball, so what was I going to do at 9 years old? They needed a goalie. So I'm I got good hand-eye coordination, so I became a goalie for this team. Came back, and I became and still am a member of Barcelona, and I became a member of Espanyol, the other team in Barcelona. And so every Sunday I was going to a game, whether that was at Camp Nou, or at the time it was Sarrià, which doesn't exist anymore. They now play Cornellà de Prat, which is a little bit outside the city. But so there was soccer galore for me, fully immersive. World Cup came around in '82. I saw the balloons float up out of the Camp Nou when they had opening ceremonies and all that stuff. Anyhow, I moved back in '84. It was you might as well, hey, you're in the ocean, you're loving life, it's beautiful, cool water, and then you go to the Sahara Desert. That was what it was like. There was nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
It's real. The '86 World Cup, I was so excited for it. And by the way, you're if you talk about, we all know that the information age has changed everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
1986, I watched, or I read in Sports Illustrated about a 3-page article on the World Cup. Right? So now I'm in high school. I guess I'm a junior or something like that, and or sophomore. And there's a little bit piece on Diego Maradona, right? Mm-hmm. And they talk about this is the best player in the world.
This guy. Yeah.
Diego Maradona.
Yeah.
I didn't know who Diego Maradona was, right? But I fell in love. I had a man crush on him, because he was 5'5", right? And I'm 5'6".
Nothing.
I thought, I'm Maradona.
You look like him. I mean,
right. There's some difference. Um, but anyway, so I watched that World Cup, and I watched it religiously, and it was mostly on, the Spanish, the Telemundo.
Spanish, Telemundo, Univision. Yeah.
And so I didn't know a lick of Spanish, but I could sing, que son Budweiser, es para usted. That was every commercial. Was that
Every break.
Yeah, I still don't know what that means. But drink Budweiser, I guess. But like that was everything to me. Like that World Cup, and then and then that man crush I had, Maradona, just like went through the roof because I'd never seen anything like that before, right?
Yeah.
But
in '86 was his World Cup, right? Like he was fantastic.
Yeah, I was like I'd never seen anything like that, Like I was like it was over.
I watched him. I watched him play at Barcelona quite till he broke. Like they shattered his leg. Goicoechea just shattered his leg, which was the beginning of his drugs and all that kind of stuff. But he was something special. Watching him float around the field, you're just like, and then he'd get the ball, and you're like, he could kill anybody at that point. Like just go. Yeah.
Well, what was so cool about it is he was small, yet he was intimidating.
Yeah.
Like he just was intimidating.
Yeah.
Like he had a presence about him, that I can't think of any player in history that had that combo. Like I'm not saying he's the greatest that ever. He's the greatest in my mind. Ever was just because of what he meant to my love of the game at that time of my life. But he just seemed terrifying to play against.
Yeah.
Like there was an edge to him, this nasty edge to him that you added to this beauty that he could perform, and it just
very true. Yeah. He wasn't afraid to mix it up. I mean, he came from nothing, so he knew his survival, right? And I think that's the way he sort of had in it. That was part of his game, definitely. Was aside from the skill and all that, the really pure part of the soccer part, there was a little bit of you want to go down? I'll go down with you. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, I got
that added dimension, right?
I got a friend who's from Napoli, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you try to claim that anybody's better than Maradona, he just
good luck.
No, that's that. I laugh at anybody saying that. How could anybody say that?
How could anybody believe that?
Yeah, that's just craziness.
Yeah. Hey, so let me ask you some rule things really quick. You had 3 ties. What are your thoughts on
4 ties?
4 ties. Yep. 4 ties. Yes, sorry about that. What do you think the rule change? Has it been a net positive, net negative for you not having OT?
It's fun. Funny, myself and the women's coach, we argued about this at length before the season started. Because apparently soccer coaches have nothing better to do than argue about these changes. But I always boil down to simple things like, well, if you'd asked me that game that we scored with 30 seconds left to tie it, would I have liked overtime? Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're on a roll. I think we win the game if we go to overtime. I really want overtime that game, At
least you're honest, right?
Yeah. I'm I think, they did it for the health of the players, but I think it's a fair rule, Yeah. I didn't change anything, because of no overtime. I think, when you're coaching, you coach based on what's going on in the game. And there's some games where, when you tie it at the end, you kind of take a deep breath and go, all right, well, thank God that ended. We escaped with a tie, right? Mm-hmm. And there's other games where you go, oh, we could use 20 more minutes because we got them, Yeah. So I think it really depends on, who your team is, that particular game, depth. We were deep. Mm-hmm. So I would tell you most of our ties, it probably would have helped us to, to have overtime because I thought we have a deep team, and I think we could have outlasted a couple of the teams and got a result in OT. But yeah, it's very. I don't know. I'm not angry about it.
Yeah.
I'd say this, like, we have this compact little season, right? And everybody knows it's tough because you're sitting there and you barely train your team. You're either like recovering or prepping for the next game and all that.
Yeah.
So adding 20 more minutes and beating up the kids can be tough. Or if you're on the road and then you just added another 45 minutes and then the kids are getting home at really late, depending on the school you're at. I mean, for us, it's not as tough as it is other places.
Right.
So I think there's all legitimate reasons for the rule change. I mean, for the excitement of the game, hey, I'm not a fan of golden goal because of weather. Like if you start the half and you got like a 50 mile per hour wind behind you, that's a little bit of a change or something. But it sure makes it entertaining, right? Like when you have those endings where you score a goal and everybody's jumping on top of each other and rushing onto the field, like that's fun stuff. So I'm not really for or against the overtime rule. I think that the only tough thing is you don't have overtime, and then if you get to postseason, you're playing overtime, right? And you haven't prepped for it all year. Big deal. There's bigger problems in the world than trying to sort that out. So I don't really care whether we have had it or not. Our last game of the season against Wisconsin Lutheran College, they needed to win to get in our conference tournament, and they had a great year. Like, that was the weird part of our conference is these teams that had great years, like, didn't make our conference tournament. We needed to win to get a bye in the first round and possibly win the conference outright. And we tied each other. And it would have been interesting to see what overtime would have been like that game. But I can tell you the last 20 minutes was really entertaining because it was two teams that really wanted a goal.
Wanted to win.
And so they would get a chance and we'd get a chance. And, the midfield disappeared and it was just...
They're just going like this. Like, where the heck's the ball?
Everybody's just going and sending extra players and then they're going back. And then at the end of the game, it's one of those awful... it looks like the final scene from Gone with the Wind. Every player just like
it drops on the ground
because nobody's happy. Right? Nobody's happy. We're thinking
and their legs are killing them. They're so tired.
We're thinking we should have been outright conference champs, and they didn't get the shot at the tournament after having the best season they'd had in years. So I don't know. It's the rule. I'm not. I don't feel one way or another.
Let me ask. I had a conversation with Coach Brandon Bianco at Denison University, and he's part of whatever rules committee thing. And he was talking about a possibility of extending the season, like a week on the front and a week on the back. So you end up getting ends up being like 10 to 12 additional days to a season. Is that something that you think would be good? Would that be something that you would like if you had an extra 5 days preseason, or you can come into camp 5 days earlier, or a week earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a soccer coach, so I'd love it. I think there's what I like it. Yeah, I do believe one of the tough things is the kids come to play college soccer, and our season is essentially too short. If I compare it to basketball or something, it's a pretty short, compact season. So making it a little longer, you maybe could handle the health of the players better. It'd be interesting to see what that would do. Like, would you be allowed the same amount of games? Would people try to schedule more games? What would that look like if you did that? For our kids, and certainly in the Midwest and the East Coast, we're not gonna have any problem with August practices. If you're down south, it's hot. So they deal with the heat a little more. So I think I would like it, but there's a lot of things that when you're just coaching, if you're not in this, you don't think about budgets. You don't think about house the kids for 5 extra days and get meals for them and all that kind of stuff. And those are real issues to schools. That the trainers got to be there, 5 days early now. Like, they just lost 5 days of their summer
Yeah.
break,
Yeah.
So I think there's loads of things like that people don't think about, that are real, right? Like
Yeah.
they just
Yeah.
think about the sport of soccer. Like
Yeah.
they care
Yeah.
about soccer. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
the gentleman that you talked about
Mm-hmm.
doesn't care about that. I just know that since I've worked here, I'm much more aware of the impact of every decision and how it impacts different people. For our kids, almost all of our kids get internships, right?
Yeah.
And so their internships can have to end earlier,
Sooner.
there,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. The downstream, right? It's always the hardest thing. You make a decision like that. What's the impact? There's the financial impact and there's the personal impact, and like you said, I didn't even think about that. You're impacting somebody's like either internship, which is really important, or their vacation that they don't get because they only have 2 months out of the year where they get to sort of unwind without having sport to deal with sport, like all that stuff.
I mean, you talk about jobs like sports information director at a college or athletic trainer.
Yeah.
Like they are on the whim of everything we do. Right?
Yeah.
Us sports. And when our sports like, oh, we're going to do a little more, well, suddenly the sports information director's got a bunch of more work that he or she does not get to decide when like they are working. They're at your whim. Same thing with like athletic trainers, right? People go into this and then they find out, oh, I'm completely at the whim of the sport. Oh, we've added a practice,
Yeah.
Oh, have you thought about the fact that the athletic trainer's supposed to be at that practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, these are things that you talk about and you think about, and I like I said, the downstream, like the downstream effect of sort of what that decision is.
Well, like the split season, right? So
that's amazing.
But it's really interesting because I think as a soccer person, you go, yeah, well, boy, would it be better if we had one game a week and it was stretched out more, and health wise, would it be better? Sure. I mean, I can tell you at a lot of schools, not the big schools, right, but a lot of smaller schools, you would tax their support staff and their facilities.
Oh, yeah.
And no one talked about that. Like, I never heard it mentioned once, but like all of a sudden you add soccer to the spring along with all those other sports. Well, you might have schools that they got lacrosse going on the soccer field. And now how are they going to have a soccer season when they got men's and women's lacrosse going on, and now you try to add soccer to it? Like, people people who do those things don't consider that a lot of schools would be under those restrictions.
Yeah, you might as, to me, yeah, wow, that would be great. Anytime you could sort of align the game to sort of the way it is elsewhere, like it's better, right? But understanding that that collegiate athletics, that might not be that might not be the objective, right? Like, it's not the objective to make the college game more like, for all intents and purposes, the European game, or what the model is that they play all year long and all that stuff. That's not necessarily the objective.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me that the only schools that are really, I don't want to say in favor of, like really pressing the two semester season model are the ones that have the money that they could just throw at whatever they need to do to set this up. They can do it. So they have the facilities to do it, right? And to me, it's just really unrealistic. So that's why I said, hey, take, not you, but college soccer, D3, aim for a week. All I've been saying when I started the whole thing that led to this conversation with Coach Bianco was, I was just saying, why not just add 5 days to preseason? How hard can that be? Can't be that expensive. Knowing that there's an expense.
Yeah.
That to me sounded a lot more reasonable than saying you're going to split the season. And
yeah, I mean, overall, I would like it.
Yeah,
I would like it. It would be,
yeah,
it would be fun. Although I'll tell you, you'll appreciate this. Like, my family does a golf outing to raise money for Alzheimer's, and if we moved it 5 days forward, we'd have to move our golf outing now.
You really do a golf outing?
Yeah.
You're gonna have to send me information on that because I would, if I can swing it, I would love to attend.
Yeah, yeah. I'll send you info on it. Yeah, we've raised.
Yeah.
We average a little over $30,000 a year doing
That's
it,
fantastic.
and it's
That's fantastic.
it's like I think my brother now works for the Alzheimer's Association, and I think the statistic he told me is like we're one of the biggest like family run
And fundraisers.
fundraisers in the country.
Wow.
You know, for doing it.
That's fantastic.
So,
I used to be like on the walk, right? The annual Alzheimer's walk. I used to do that quite a bit early on.
yeah. We actually, our first game of the season, we raised money for Alzheimer's now too. We play
that's
against
fantastic.
UW Platteville, and their coach's mom got early onset Alzheimer's. And so when we play each other, we raise money. We did it for the first year this year, and we got like the corner flags are little Alzheimer's flags, and
that's awesome.
yeah. And actually, here it is. I got a T-shirt right here, so that's it.
All right. What do I have to send you dollar-wise as a donation for your cause to get a T-shirt?
You want one of those T-shirts? I'll send it to you. But you should donate.
I want to make.
Donate.
Yes, I want to make a donation, so I'll send you $20. Is that fair? $25? Yeah.
Yeah, that's cheap.
All right.
But that's fine. I'm just messing with you.
I was going to say that's awesome fundraising on that. It's like, oh, come on, you can do better than $20.
I'm just giving you crap.
That's awesome.
But I'll this coming year.
Okay.
I'll contact you about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you go 13-3-4. You lose in the semis, as you mentioned. You went 10-0-1, which is how. Again, I noticed you because you were at that point. You were one of, I'm going to say, 10 undefeated teams at that level, and and that's until you lost to Concordia, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
This is, I think, from what I checked, at least in your tenure, this is probably the best start. That was like the best start that one of your teams had gone 10 games. 10.
I think we were looking it up because the assistant coaches, like I said, played at MSOE, and they played for Jimmy. And almost every year, like we had to go back, I don't know how many years to find when we won an opener. We almost every year had lost the
right out of the game.
Now, we kind of stopped that. Like, we've been kind of a streak in winning the opening game the last couple of years, but for like years, we lost the opener every year.
Every year.
Yeah, so like to have a streak of winning at the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, did you, at any given point as your streak is going, were you thinking, man, we got something special here?
Yeah. Yes. I guess, I'm talking to a guy who coached. I think, to be honest, like, as we were winning, I for sure was like, okay, we're good. I'm not afraid of anybody. Like, there wasn't, honestly, like, there's no team in the country I don't think we can play with. I know we're not better than everybody, like, or, better than the top teams, but I'm like, I'm not afraid of them. I think the biggest thing that happened is on the streak, you start to feel a little bit of pressure, to be honest with you. Like, you can feel pressure when you're losing too much, and you can feel pressure when you're winning a lot.
Especially if you're winning too.
Yeah, and so I think I was starting to think, well, how good are we going to be? And so, yeah, I basically thought we could win every game that we played in. And so, I don't know if, like, the special word, without, like, sounding weird or anything, like, it feels like a word, you say when you're writing stories, But when you're coaching your team, you're going, well, how come we didn't finish more goals on serves? How come, we get set plays and we don't do a very good job with them? You're thinking about those things, right? And so I think, I knew we were onto something. I know we got good players. But I think you're always thinking about, like, what's going to go wrong and how to make sure it doesn't go wrong. And so I think when you're in it, you don't think about that stuff as much. Maybe you should, because maybe it would make the ride a little more fun as a coach. But like, I'm always like focused on, well, what's if we're gonna lose, what's gonna happen? How are we?
What's around the corner? Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I also knew that like our season, like our toughest games, were going to be at the end of the year. Like all the tough teams in the toughest teams in conference were
at
the tail, you know. And so, like when we played Concordia, that's a good team, and they needed to win. Like they needed to win the game because they had lost a couple games. I don't think they expected to lose, and so that game for them was massive, right?
Yeah.
And we actually gave up 2 PKs in the game, and we lost 2-1, right? So.
Set pieces.
Yeah, as you've heard,
Get to work.
Yeah. I kid about like how most, you know, usually when you're coaching practice, you don't call fouls because you're trying to make the kids tougher. Thinking, you know, next year all I'm doing is calling fouls.
It's calling fouls.
Yeah, you dummy. Do not stop fouling.
Yeah.
You know, because you know you give up.
I was one. I'm just gonna say, I was never a guy who never called it, except when I was instructed not to. But if I was out there, I tried to call everything. Be like, get your hands off of them, right? Just because I thought that's more valuable in a game, knowing how to defend somebody rather than.
I wish I would have talked to you before our season started.
You should have, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm just gonna show up there. And I'll just show up at your practices. Don't worry, I got you.
Yeah, there you
go. Hey, let me ask you because I don't know a lot about you guys out there, so this is a learning experience for me. But when you lost to Aurora 2-0 the first game, and then you lost to them, like you said, in the 2-1 in the semifinals. I mean, do you think? Were they just better, or do you think like there was something that you didn't do, like not you, but your team didn't do that they needed to do this? Yeah,
I got to take responsibility.
Like, was there something that you thought like we just couldn't do this, or we just didn't execute this that led to that, or do you think you really had a chance to win that game, especially the semifinal, right?
Yeah, I mean, no, do I think we were? Yeah. You know, it's always weird, you know, saying this now on video for anybody to see, but like, I think we were better than them. You know, so I just put fuel out there for Aurora for next year, right? But they already beat us.
It's so on the board.
Doesn't matter
this
what
is so
they beat us.
So on the board.
Yeah. You know, the first game, like I said, I did the analytics, and I just didn't think we did things in the final third, in particular, to create as many chances as we should have based on the amount of time we had the ball, right? And it was, you know, it was details, right? It's like we're late, like the wide back doesn't get forward quick enough to do an overlap, right?
Yeah,
so now, like we said, the timing's not there, and there were times where I thought it got a little too individual to make a play, as opposed to using each other, and you know, and then, you know, if you watch that game, we lost 2-0. We had a bunch of chances to tie it. Again, we gave up a PK to start the games. We were down 1-0 and then gave up a late goal. But, we missed a couple really close chances to tie it, but didn't create enough. And I think the second game, in the first half, we really had the ball a lot against them and missed a one-on-one with the keeper. And then the second half, we weren't playing as well, and it took me a while to watch the game because I was so upset about losing, right? So I didn't, every time we finish a game, I usually watch it right away, and then the second time I watch it, I break it down. But when it's the final game of the season and you lose, hopefully you're losing the final game of the season, because if you're not in college soccer, then you want to win the national championship, because if you win your last game and that's it, then you probably haven't had that great of a year, right? You know, so you end with a loss or the national championship. But anyway, like, I had a hard time watching it, and then when I did rewatch it, I was just like, it wasn't as bad as I thought in the second half, but again, it was just moments where we just could do better, make better choices, or, you know, another guy get in the box, and then certainly, we scored with, I think, 7 or 8 minutes left to tie it.
Yeah.
We got a penalty kick, and we actually missed the PK and followed up and scored. And I thought, okay, here we go, And I honestly thought, like, if we go to overtime, that's fine. Like, we're deep, and we'll come at them, and it's going to be hard, and we're going to make this happen. And then we gave up a corner at the end,
Yeah.
And everything leading up to the corner was kind of difficult.
Yeah.
From a coach's point.
No, there's those games, right? That nothing seems to. That's why I always ask.
Yeah. I mean, it's soccer.
Like,
I think, if you're a coach and you don't take responsibility for the loss, I don't think you're much of a coach. If I'm watching, like, say, the U.S. national team, I don't blame everything on Berhalter,
Yeah.
Like, I don't go, oh, why didn't Dest see his man and cover, mark him and cover Berhalter, right? But when I'm coaching, like, I blame it on me, right? Because I'm like, well, I'm coaching the person who made the mistake, and how didn't I convey to him that it's that important to do this, right? So I think you're in those two brains. That's kind of me rambling, but no, I think we were good enough to, win those 2 games, and we didn't. And hats off to them, because 1 year ago they didn't make our conference tournament, and this year they won.
Oh wow!
That's what our conference is like.
Like yeah.
The team, the 2 teams that were in the final last year, one finished in 7th or 8th place and didn't get in the tournament, and the other finished in 6th place.
Wow!
So that's what our conference has become like. It's tight and it's hard,
and the difference between top and bottom is just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, and that the next year could just be totally reversed.
Yeah. I mean, there's just it's like we're not the East Coast where you guys are all close together, but when you talk about the greater metro areas of like Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, Indianapolis, Minneapolis, like there's a lot of players in these areas, right? And there's more than enough to go around, so there's a lot of talent here. And specifically like the greater Chicago area, there's just
it's just teeming with loads of players. Loads of players.
Yeah. And so the level's pretty high.
Hey, so I mean we've gone down plenty of rabbit hole, and I actually just realized I have another one of these to go for the day. So I got one last question for you, and then I'll let you have your day back. But so what are your plans for the off season? Where do you go from here? And I ask that just because I think, okay, so you had, right? To me, this is about how do I return back so that we get to the same level next year and then make a little bit more progress, right? Like we do something to improve. So what do you have planned?
Well, as you know, D3 soccer, it's its own animal. So obviously I can't train the kids for a long time, right? So, number one, like as a coach, obviously you're recruiting. Like that's the name of the game. We don't, we were talking before about whether you counter or play possession and all this. I'm like, we got to go get players, right? And we can't ever pretend that coaching is the number one thing. Players are the number one thing, right?
Are.
So, so there's that. You go recruit. And then 2, with the kids on the team, a lot of it, or I would say like 90% of it is having a culture where they push each other to get better at the sport and buy into the fact that they own it, right? They own it. Like we don't have the 20 hours a week that you have in D1 and all this kind of stuff. So are they in the weight room? Are they playing soccer? Are they finding ways to, get together and push each other to be a team, right? And to own the performance of the team, which starts with messaging from me, but then them, buying into it. So I think that, and then obviously in the spring when we do stuff together, we'll kind of, see how that went, basically. But the hope now is that they're buying into that idea of they're in charge, right? And it is part of the beauty, I think, of D3 soccer is it's really a choice. Like, it's a choice by the kids. We wanna play this and we want to be good at it, and they're not ruled by the scholarship they're getting. They don't stick around on the team because, if they don't, they lose 40% of what it costs to go to school, right? Or something. So I think that's really the that little thing that all of us as coaches always have to figure out is how do we make sure the kids have that culture. And so that's the number one thing. Yeah. So see if we can, if they do it.
I like that. The idea that it is a choice. Yeah. There's no, you're there because you want to be there, right? Like you play, you commit yourself to, because that's your decision. It's not like once you're in, they got you somehow financially or.
Yeah. When I was in college, I was there was a year and I turned into a little baby, like college kids often do, right? And
no.
Yeah, right. And I was thinking, well, maybe I'm not going to play, right? Mm-hmm. And I was upset about playing time and blah blah blah. And well, one of the things that besides the fact that I love soccer and I didn't want to be a quitter, right? There's the other part that was like, well, how am I going to go home and tell my dad who works for the Milwaukee public school system that I'm giving up part of my scholarship because I'm upset about not playing? That's not happening.
Yeah.
That he's going to be like, what? No,
Yeah, get out, go back, go back. You're not welcome here. Go back.
Even if he would have said it's okay, it would have been like, well, you'd have to know my dad, but he would have just been like, do what you want, do what you want, and I would have felt guilty for the rest of my life. It just would have been brutal. That Catholic guilt. There was no no screw.
My dad would. It's your choice. So get a job and tell me when you're moving out.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There certainly might have been. You have to cover the cost of your scholarship.
Yeah. And it's happened. You're not here on a free ride either. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So with that, that was my little moment, right?
Yeah.
And part of me that probably made me stay was the money because it was part of how school was getting paid.
Yeah.
And it all worked out fine. My career went fine after that, and I grew up and thought, learned. Actually, I know we go down rabbit holes. My second family is it's not my second family, but it's kind of like my second. Is the Moynihan family. So Jim Moynihan was like my youth soccer coach. Sue Moynihan, who I told you was a coach at UW Milwaukee.
Right.
Actually, if you look at my blog, look at the story "Take Care of My Girls," and I think it's like one of the greatest soccer stories of all time.
Right.
So Sue takes the job at UW Milwaukee with no experience because her mom died of cancer, and what she accomplished there was unbelievable. Her brother Mike eventually becomes the head coach. Now he's the coach at Northwestern. Anyway. So when I came home from college, I was, all mopey and complaining about, stuff at school. And I'm with Jim Moynihan, and, we're having beers. And he's the dad and my youth soccer coach.
Yeah.
And he's laughing and all this stuff. And he goes, yeah, well, here's what I think. I think you need to shut your mouth and quit being a big baby and play soccer. And it was like
rub dirt in it,
And it was like I think I was just froze in that moment, and I'm like, that might have been the greatest advice I ever got. Shut your mouth and play soccer and quit being a baby. Right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think that's very true. That is I see it with kids all along. I mean, I coach now, for the gear. I volunteer coach at the high school where my kids go, and so many of these kids, it's like, why don't you just shut up and play? Just shut up. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about where you're going to end up and this and that. Just shut up and play and watch how much of that. And I always say to them, I don't always just say shut up. I always say, if you just shut up and you stop trying to think about all this other stuff, watch how much of a better player you become.
Yeah. Well, I've done a couple like college, things the last couple days, and then people ask me like, well, what are colleges looking for? And I'm like, good human beings that are good soccer players.
Yeah.
I'm like,
tough.
I'm like, and by the way, we can go into the details, but like, let's just make it really simple. Are you good at soccer, and are you a good human being? Like, that's what we're looking for. It's not. Yeah. It's not any more complicated than that.
Complicated than that, right? Yeah.
Like if you're not.
That's very true. And I will say this too, especially as I talk. For a while, I was really in tune to the idea of culture and what sort of culture you as a coach and all this stuff. And you realize you spend an inordinate amount of effort on culture. Coaches do, because they have to, because that's sort of what defines their program. And it takes one bad apple in the locker room to destroy it.
Yeah.
And I never really equated those two things, right? Like I thought culture would survive, and it takes one. It takes one. And that's why the good human being thing is really, really important.
It's really delicate, right? Like it's it's a delicate fabric, because one person who, wants their agenda to be bigger than the team's agenda. Yep. And here's the difficult thing about it. Like, they're kids. Like, I get it. Like, I want to be a good human being, but they're a kid between the 18 and 21 years old is just a kid. And, like, I just told you about me and how I was all whiny, Yeah. And then somebody comes and, like, slaps me across the head and goes, you're being a baby. Like, I'm glad I got that info, because it did wake me up, and I played much better after that. Yeah. But the culture stuff is huge, and you're right. But I'll tell you this, like, I was involved with a high school team, right? Mm-hmm. And the head coach, who's awesome, right? Mm-hmm. We had all these, like, every player had, like, every young player, it was a girls' team. So, like, every freshman that made the team had, like, a big sister buddy, right? So, and then there was, like, the team get-together, and this get-together, and this get-together, right? Well, meanwhile, we had a bunch of kids upset about who was named captains, right? And we're doing all this bonding stuff. And finally I was like, hey, can we bond over winning? Like, can we win? Yeah. Like, we're all worried about everything else except for winning the soccer game. And aren't we like a soccer team? Aren't we supposed to try to win? You guys are too worried about the baloney. Like, let's bond over kicking the other team's ass, by the way.
I love that. Actually, that's very true, though. All this stuff can, like, especially for the young players, right? They get all, like, crazy and all that stuff. They forget, like, what am I here for? Oh, that's right. Put the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah, right? Like, and by the way, you said, like, we're going to remember a lot of the other things more, right? What it was like off the field, how the team got together. Yeah. But don't kid yourself. Like, you got a job to do. Like, you're on a soccer field. Go out and try to win it. You know? There was a quote one of the guys on the team said to me. I've been Jimmy is getting in the MSOE Hall of Fame here, among the 8 million other Hall of Fames he's part of, right? And so I'm trying to get the kids to send in, like, stuff that Jimmy said or did, so I can give it to Jimmy's kids and family, right? And the one kid said Jimmy's pregame speech was like, hey guys, let's have some fun out there. Oh, and by the way, it's a lot more fun when you're kicking their ass.
Yeah.
And I was like,
that's very true.
I was like, that's kind of funny. Let's have some fun out there. And it's a lot more fun.
Hey, on that note, I want to thank you.
Yeah.
This was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed myself. I'm gonna tell you something. I never thought I would the record would be broken. But you've broken the record for longest simple coach to coach interview by 20 minutes.
Wow.
So I was at $148 was the record, and this is 208. So
we probably both have bathrooms to go to right now.
Yeah. I actually do, and then I got another one. I did completely spaced on. So got another.
Because I got player meetings starting in 30 minutes.
Nice. Yeah, you could do. I'll love doing the player meetings if you want to do the interview for me. We'll switch.
Well, really, I appreciate you having me. This was a lot of fun, and like I said, when you emailed me, I thought it was some weird thing where I had to go check and make sure I wasn't gonna hit the link and all of a sudden have some crazy stuff happen.
I kept sending you stuff and you're like, why?
My wife doesn't want to listen to me. Why would anybody else?
Yeah.
So
No. Yeah, I do. I'm like you said, you need therapy. Like I've been doing this for a year. Like if I don't get therapy soon, forget it. Like I'm gonna be total basket case.
Yeah.
But anyhow, all right, Coach.
Well, I
Thank
appreciate
you.
having me. I will send you the info on the Alzheimer's
Yep.
stuff. So
Yeah, please do.
take care.
See ya. If you like this show, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can also find me on anti-social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks. This is a message from my Chief Marketing Officer. I think this keeps him happy.